The hearing aids were small, almost invisible, tucked behind each ear and connected by a thin wire that ran beneath the collar of his navy blue button-down shirt. They had been activated exactly 11 minutes earlier, backstage in a small dressing room at the Family Feud studio, by a bilateral cochlear implant audiologist named Dr. Priya Nair, who had flown in from Houston specifically for this day. The man wearing them was 47 years old. His name was Gabriel Ruiz. He had been profoundly deaf since birth. He had never heard a single sound in his entire life. Not music, not thunder, not a dog barking, not his own heartbeat, and not the voice of his 16-year-old daughter Sophia, who had been born to him and his wife Carla in 2009, and who had grown up speaking Spanish and English fluently and signing ASL fluently with her deaf father. Gabriel Ruiz walked onto the Family Feud stage with the hearing aids on, unable to understand any of the sound flooding into his ears for the first time, his face arranged into the careful blank expression of a man who had been told this might not work, who had been told that some adults who receive cochlear implants later in life never learn to interpret speech, who had been told to have no expectations. His family stood at the blue podium next to him, all of them hearing, all of them fluent in ASL because Gabriel had taught them. And at the 49th minute of the taping, Steve Harvey walked Sophia Ruiz to a single microphone at the center of the stage, stepped back, and nodded at her. Sophia Ruiz looked at her father. She took a breath, and she said, out loud, in her real voice, the words that she had signed to him every night of her life at bedtime. Papa, te amo. Buenas noches. Gabriel Ruiz stood completely still for 3 seconds. Then, his face cracked. He covered his eyes with both hands. And Steve Harvey, standing 6 feet away, covered his own face with his hands and turned toward the back of the stage because he could not watch a man hear his daughter's voice for the first time at the age of 47 without breaking. It was April 22nd, 2026, a Wednesday taping at the Atlanta studio, the second episode scheduled that day. The Ruiz family had flown in from San Antonio, Texas, the night before, on tickets that had been coordinated in part by the Texas Hearing Institute, a nonprofit that had covered 60% of Gabriel's cochlear implant surgery the previous November. The family at the blue podium was Gabriel, his wife Carla, who worked as a physical therapist, their 16-year-old daughter Sophia, their 12-year-old son Mateo, and Gabriel's older brother Ernesto, who was also deaf and who was there partly as a family member and partly because Gabriel had not wanted to do this without his brother in the room. The competing family was the Hendersons from Charlotte, North Carolina. 5 members led by a grandfather named Earl, who was a retired high school football coach. The producers had spent 6 weeks coordinating with Dr. Nair and the Texas Hearing Institute to time this specific taping with the activation of Gabriel's implants, because Gabriel's surgery in November had been followed by the required 6-month healing period, and the activation window, the appointment where the implants are first turned on, had been scheduled to align, if possible, with the taping. It had aligned. The producers knew. The Ruiz family knew. Dr. Nair knew. Nobody else in the studio knew. But nobody in that studio knew what was about to happen. Gabriel Ruiz had been born deaf in 1978 in San Antonio, Texas, to Mexican-American parents who had not known anyone who was deaf and who had, for the first 3 years of his life, not known what to do. His mother, Dolores, had taken him to a doctor when he was 6 months old, because he had not been startling at loud sounds the way his older brother Ernesto had. That doctor had sent them to another doctor, who had sent them to another, and by the time Gabriel was 18 months old, a specialist in Austin had confirmed that he was profoundly deaf. The specialist had told Dolores and her husband Mario in 1980 that their son would likely never speak, that they should consider sending him to a residential school for the deaf, and that ASL was probably his best path forward. Dolores had refused to send her son away. She had gone to the San Antonio Public Library and had checked out every book on American Sign Language that the library carried. She had taught herself ASL, one word at a time. She had taught Mario. She had taught Ernesto, who had turned out to also be deaf, diagnosed 2 years later at the age of 4. The Ruiz family had become a bilingual household, Spanish spoken aloud, ASL signed, and both boys had grown up fully fluent in both. Gabriel had graduated from the Texas School for the Deaf in Austin in 1996. He had attended Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C. on a scholarship, had graduated in 2000 with a degree in graphic design, and had returned to San Antonio to work for a small design firm that specialized in accessible communication materials for school districts. He had met Carla Mendoza in 2007 at a 4th of July barbecue at his brother's house. Carla was hearing. She had learned some basic ASL in a community college elective in 2004, and she had fingerspelled her name to Gabriel that afternoon, slowly and imperfectly, and Gabriel had laughed and had corrected her hand shape gently and had taken her out to dinner 2 weeks later. They had married in 2008. Sophia had been born in 2009. Mateo in 2013. Gabriel Ruiz had made a decision when Sophia was a baby that he had never once deviated from. He had decided that his daughter was going to grow up fluent in ASL, because he wanted her to be able to speak to him in his native language, but he had also decided that she was never going to have to interpret for him. He had seen what had happened to the hearing children of deaf parents in his own extended family. The way they became tiny translators by the age of 5, the way they sat in banks and doctors' offices interpreting for their parents, the way they grew up too fast. Gabriel had refused to put that on Sophia. He had used professional interpreters when he needed them. He had built his own accommodations into his life. He had never asked Sophia, not once in 16 years, to be his translator. The consequence was that Sophia had grown up signing to her father in ASL, and speaking to her mother and her brother and her friends in spoken English and Spanish. And Gabriel had never once, not one single time, heard his daughter's voice. He had felt her voice. That was the word he used. He had felt it when she laughed, when her little chest shook against his, when he held her as a toddler. He had felt it when she sang along to the radio in the car, when the vibrations came up through the seat. He had felt it against his cheek when she leaned in close to hum a melody so he could feel the rhythm. But he had never heard it. He did not know what she sounded like. In June 2024, Sophia Ruiz, 15 years old, a rising sophomore at Thomas Jefferson High School in San Antonio, had been sitting at the kitchen table doing homework when she had looked up at her father across the table and had signed to him, "Papa, if you could ever hear, what would you want to hear first?" Gabriel had paused. He had thought about it. He had signed back, "I would want to hear you. I would want to hear your voice." Sophia had signed back, "Why me? Why not Mom, or Mateo, or music?" Gabriel had signed back, "Because I have wondered about your voice longer than any of those other things. I have wondered about it since the day you were born." Sophia had not signed anything for a long time. She had looked down at her homework. She had signed, finally, "Okay." What Sophia Ruiz had done over the next 6 months, unbeknownst to her father and with the quiet help of her mother Carla, was research. She had researched cochlear implants. She had researched bilateral cochlear implants for late deafened adults, and then for profoundly from birth adults. She had researched success rates. She had researched the Texas Hearing Institute. She had researched Dr. Priya Nair, a Houston-based audiologist who specialized in prelingually deaf adult recipients, one of the harder patient categories because the brain had never developed the neural pathways for sound. She had printed out studies. She had read about the activation moment, the moment the implants are turned on, usually about 4 to 6 weeks after surgery, and the sound is introduced for the first time. She had read that for prelingually deaf adults, the activation is often overwhelming, confusing, and not immediately comprehensible. Speech often sounds like electronic noise for weeks or months. Some patients never learn to understand speech. Some do. Nobody can predict. In December 2024, Sophia had approached her mother Carla with a sealed envelope. Inside the envelope was a handwritten letter, 3 pages long, that Sophia had written to her father. She had asked her mother to help her translate the letter into written ASL gloss, because she wanted to give her father the letter in the form of a video, signed, because she wanted him to receive it in his own language. Carla had read the letter. Carla had cried at the kitchen sink for 20 minutes. Then Carla had helped her daughter make the video. The video had been 12 minutes long. In it, Sophia had signed to her father, slowly and carefully, that she had spent 6 months researching cochlear implants, that she knew the surgery was expensive, that she knew the outcome was uncertain, that she knew he had never asked for the surgery because he had not wanted to burden the family with a $60,000 procedure whose results were not guaranteed, that she had applied on his behalf to a Texas Hearing Institute grant program, that he had been accepted, that the grant would cover $36,000 of the procedure, that she had started a GoFundMe that had raised $18,000 more, that Carla had saved $6,000 from her physical therapy practice over the course of that year, that the surgery was paid for, that the only thing left was for him to say yes. Sophia had ended the video with one last signed sentence. "Papa, you told me once that if you could ever hear, the first thing you would want to hear was my voice. I have been saving my voice for you for 16 years, and I would like you to hear it now. Please say yes." Gabriel Ruiz had watched his daughter's video on a Sunday evening in December 2024. He had cried for 20 minutes at the kitchen table. Then he had signed, to his entire family watching him, yes. And that wasn't even the part that made Steve cry. Gabriel's bilateral cochlear implant surgery had been performed at Houston Methodist Hospital on November 5, 2025. The procedure had taken 6 hours. The recovery had been difficult. He had been in significant pain for the first 2 weeks. He had developed a mild infection that had delayed his activation by 3 weeks. The activation window, the appointment where the implants would be turned on, had been rescheduled twice. It had finally been set for April 22, 2026. Sophia had, separately, applied to Family Feud 9 months earlier, as a way to bring her father in front of a national audience for the moment she had been imagining since she was 15 years old. She had timed the application carefully. She had coordinated with the producers. She had flown Dr. Nair in. She had made Dr. Nair a private part of the plan. What Gabriel did not know, what he was not told until the morning of the taping, was that Dr. Nair was going to activate his implants in the dressing room before the taping began, and that Sophia had prepared to speak to him on stage. The morning of the taping, Dr. Nair had come to the Ruiz family's hotel room at 6:30 a.m. She had sat down with Gabriel and explained, through Carla and Sophia interpreting in ASL, what was about to happen. She had told him that the implants would be activated at 9 a.m. in the dressing room backstage. She had told him that speech was going to sound like noise for the first several hours, maybe days. maybe longer. She had told him that some patients took months to distinguish words. She had told him there was no guarantee he would understand Sophia when she spoke to him on stage. She had also told him, and this was the part that Sophia had asked Dr. Nair to tell him in a specific way, that even if he did not understand his daughter's words today, he would experience the sound of her voice, the pitch, the warmth, the rhythm. Those were pre-linguistic qualities that the brain could process immediately, even on day one, even in the activation hour. Gabriel had nodded. He had signed, "I understand." He had signed, "I am ready." He had signed, "I am scared." Carla had taken his hand. The activation had happened at 9:11 a.m. in a small dressing room backstage. Dr. Nair had connected the external processors to the internal implants, one ear at a time. Gabriel had flinched. Then he had gone very still. Sound had entered his brain for the first time in 47 years. Dr. Nair had been trained to watch this moment carefully. Too much sound, too fast, and the patient shut down. She had adjusted the volume. She had given him a moment. He had signed, shakily, It's like water. Everywhere. I can't. There is too much." Dr. Nair had signed back, "That's normal. Breathe. Your brain will start to organize it. Give it an hour." Gabriel had breathed. He had listened to the sound of the air conditioning, which he did not know was air conditioning. He had listened to Dr. Nair's voice, which he did not know was a voice. He had listened to Carla softly saying his name, which he did not recognize as his name. His brain was being washed in sound it had never processed before. By the time the taping began at 10:45 a.m., Gabriel had been in the sound world for approximately 94 minutes. The main game was a blur for him. He watched his family answer questions. He signed his own answers when it was his turn, and Carla spoke them aloud into the microphone. Steve Harvey had been fully briefed by Denise Coleman in the morning production meeting. Steve had walked into the dressing room during a break in the pre-taping setup, had sat down in front of Gabriel, had signed, crudely, imperfectly but intentionally, the ASL for "Thank you for being here" and "You are brave." Gabriel had smiled. He had signed back, "I was taught by my mother that strangers who try are family." Steve had pressed his hand over his heart. The Ruiz family won the first round. The Hendersons won the second. The score was tied going into the third. At the 49th minute, Steve called Sophia out from behind the podium. He walked her to a single microphone at the center of the stage. The cameras pulled in tight. The studio lights dimmed slightly. The floor director held for silence. Steve stepped back. Steve turned to the camera. He said, quietly, "What you are about to see has never happened on this stage before. This young lady's father has been deaf his entire life. 47 years. This morning, at 9:11 a.m., in a dressing room backstage, a doctor named Priya Nair activated a pair of cochlear implants in his ears. He is hearing sound for the first time in his life today. He has been in the sound world for about 4 hours. Steve paused. His daughter is about to speak to him. He has never heard her voice. She has been saving it for him. Please be quiet with us." The studio fell completely silent. Sophia Ruiz looked at her father across 6 feet of stage. Her eyes filled up. She steadied herself. She looked at Dr. Nair, who was standing in the wings. Dr. Nair nodded. Sophia said, out loud, in a clear, steady voice that her father had never heard before in his life, "Papá, te amo. Buenas noches." Gabriel Ruiz stood completely still for 3 seconds. His eyes were wide. He was not yet crying. He was processing. Dr. Nair later said that the brain on day one of activation does not typically parse words, but that prosody and pitch and the human warmth of a voice come through immediately. Gabriel Ruiz heard a sound come out of his daughter's mouth, a soft, young, female sound, with rising and falling pitch, with a warmth that he had felt in her chest for 16 years, and his body recognized something his brain had never experienced. His body recognized his daughter. His face cracked. He covered his eyes with both hands. Sophia took one step toward him. Her voice came out shakier this time. "Papa, it's me. It's Sophia. That's my voice." Gabriel Ruiz lowered his hands. Tears were running down his face. He walked toward his daughter. He wrapped his arms around her. He pressed his ear against the top of her head, against her hair, so that when she spoke again, her voice would travel through her body and into his ear at the same time. Sophia said, into his chest, against his ear, "Papa, I love you. I love you. I love you." Gabriel Ruiz made a sound. It was not a word. It was the sound a man makes when something that has been missing from his life for 47 years is suddenly, unexpectedly, handed to him. A boom operator later said that the sound registered on the microphones as a soft, low moan that lasted about 4 seconds. Nobody in the studio forgot it. Steve Harvey, standing 6 feet away, covered his own face with his hands. He turned his body toward the back of the stage. He stood that way for 11 full seconds. The camera caught his shoulders shaking. The camera caught him take a breath. The camera caught him wipe his face with both palms. The camera caught him turn back around. Carla Ruiz walked out from behind the podium. She stood behind her husband and her daughter. She did not touch them. She let them have the moment. Mateo, the 12-year-old son, walked out too. He stood next to his mother. Ernesto, Gabriel's deaf brother, walked to the center of the stage. Ernesto did not speak and did not sign. He simply stood there. His own face was wet. The studio fell completely silent. Steve Harvey walked forward slowly. He stood about 3 feet from Gabriel and Sophia. He waited. When Gabriel finally lifted his head from his daughter's hair, Steve met his eyes. Steve signed, slowly, carefully, the ASL for "I am happy with you." Gabriel nodded. He signed back, "Thank you for this moment." Steve turned to the camera. "I want to talk to everybody watching at home." His voice was hoarse. "A long time ago, a stranger at a gas station in Cleveland, Ohio, said 8 words to me that changed my life. God's got a plan bigger than your pain." He said it, and he walked off. I never saw him again. I held on to those 8 words for 35 years. Steve paused. He looked at Gabriel and Sophia. "Brother, I was you. Not the same pain, but the same waiting. I was waiting to be given something I couldn't ask for out loud. And let me tell you something. That plan? It came through a 16-year-old girl. That's how God works. He uses the people you raised. He uses the people you loved into being. He sends it back through them." Steve turned to Sophia. "Young lady, you spent a year of your life getting your father a sound he did not know he needed. You did that. Not a foundation, not a doctor. You. You started this." But Steve wasn't done. He pulled out his phone. He dialed. He put it on speaker. "Dr. Priya Nair, please." "This is Priya." "Doctor, it's Steve. I need you to come out on this stage." Dr. Nair walked out from the wings in a gray blazer and glasses. She was a small woman, about 5'2", and she was crying quietly. Steve said, "Doctor, for the families watching at home, how many prelingually deaf adults in the United States qualify for bilateral cochlear implants each year but can't afford the procedure. Dr. Nair, into the microphone, said, approximately 4,000 adults a year. The surgery, including activation and long-term auditory rehabilitation, costs between $50,000 and $85,000 per patient. Most insurance covers a portion. The gap is usually around $20,000 to $30,000 per patient. For most working families, that is the gap that stops the surgery from happening. Steve said, Doctor, tonight we are starting a new foundation. We are calling it the Herd Foundation. And the Herd Foundation is going to close that gap. For every qualified candidate, across the country, for as long as I am alive, nobody is going to die deaf in America because they couldn't afford to be heard. Doctor, I need you to be the founding medical director. Will you do it? Dr. Priya Nair said, on stage through tears, Yes, Mr. Harvey, yes. Earl Henderson, the retired football coach from Charlotte, walked across the stage from the Henderson family podium. He was wearing a red Carolina Panthers hoodie. He stopped in front of Gabriel. He stuck out his hand. Gabriel shook it. Earl said, slowly and clearly so Gabriel could watch his face, even if he couldn't yet understand the sounds, Brother, my grandson was born deaf in 2019. He got his cochlear implant at 14 months old. I have been waiting 6 years to meet a man like you, a man who waited 47 years for what my grandson got at 1. I am not going to say sorry. I am just going to say welcome. Welcome to the sound world, brother. Gabriel's brother Ernesto interpreted the English into ASL as Earl spoke. Gabriel watched his brother's hands. He put his hand on Earl's shoulder. He signed, through Ernesto's voice, Thank you, sir. Tell your grandson a man 47 years behind him is right here behind him now. Both families won $20,000. Steve covered it personally. The tape rolled for another 32 minutes. Family Feud aired the full, unedited segment as a 2-hour primetime special on May 24, 2026. The clip of Sofia saying, Papa, te amo, buenas noches, crossed 230 million views in the first 72 hours. By the end of the first week, it was at 410 million. By the end of the month, it had reached 530 million. The highest single-clip performance of any Family Feud moment ever recorded. The hashtag Herd Foundation trended for 13 consecutive days. A deaf man in Michigan posted a video of himself watching the episode with his own cochlear implants that had been activated 4 years earlier, and he wrote, I remember the first sound I ever heard. It was my wife saying my name. Today I watched Gabriel Ruiz hear his daughter, and I cried for a man I don't know. That video crossed 37 million views. The Herd Foundation was formally incorporated within 10 days. In its first 6 months of operation, it funded bilateral cochlear implants for 940 qualified candidates across 38 states, ranging in age from 19 to 73. Steve Harvey personally donated $11 million in the first month. The public contributed another $72 million by the end of the year. Gabriel Ruiz began intensive auditory rehabilitation in late April 2026. By July 2026, approximately 12 weeks after activation, he could understand simple sentences spoken slowly in a quiet room. By November 2026, he could follow most conversations with familiar speakers. On his 48th birthday in March 2027, Sofia sang him Las Mañanitas at his birthday dinner in San Antonio. He understood every word. In a 60 Minutes interview in June 2026, Steve Harvey was asked why he had turned his back during the reveal. He said, because a man hearing his daughter for the first time at 47 years old is not a thing the host of a game show gets to watch face to face. That was between him and her and God. I just didn't want to be in the middle of it with my face all in the shot. Some moments don't belong to television. In April 2026, 1 week after the taping, Gabriel Ruiz sat in his living room in San Antonio, Texas, with his hearing aids in, listening to his daughter Sophia read aloud from a book. The book was Bless Me Ultima by Rudolfo Anaya, a novel she had chosen because it was a book about a Mexican-American family in the Southwest. She sat cross-legged on the floor in front of her father's armchair. Gabriel could not yet understand most of the words she read, but he could hear her voice, the pitch, the warmth, the rhythm. After a while, he raised his hand. Sophia stopped reading. Gabriel signed to her, "Baby, keep going. I don't understand the words yet, but I am listening to your voice. I have 16 years to catch up on." Sophia nodded. She opened the book again. She kept reading, and Gabriel Ruiz closed his eyes and listened to the voice he had saved his whole life for. Some fathers go their whole lives without ever hearing the voices of the children they raised. And some fathers, if they are very lucky, are given 16 years of saved voice by a daughter who loved them enough to find a way. If this story reached you tonight, do this one thing. Hit subscribe, tap the bell, and in the comments write the name of someone whose voice you would save for somebody who could not yet hear it. Just the name. Somebody is reading these comments right now, sitting in a waiting room before their own activation appointment, and your name might be the one that tells them it's worth it.